for that partial victory with the SEC. It's partial because they still said, some of these institutional sales could be considered illegal securities.
Right.
But these retail sales from all over the place,
it's 100% order out of chaos what's going on in the finance, and we'll get into that. We are live. We're sort of in a pre-show mode right now, but let's let a couple people trickle in. I see Cyan Razor Cell. Shout out to you, man. Thanks for joining. And we'll get started here in just a moment. ZNN's return from hiatus.
At just the right time.
Is that our 4th anniversary?
That's right. 4 years. It's crucial.
You're listening to the Zetetic newscast on the Zetetic News Network with your hosts, Dave, and Xavier Diamant. Proceed by inquiry.
All right, welcome to episode 42 of the Zetetic newscast. As stated in our intro, we're your hosts, Xavier Diamant and myself, Dave, the one asking all the stupid questions. Thank you for tuning in. If you are streaming on YouTube, this is a live call-in show. We're going to be celebrating our 4th anniversary as Zetetic News Network, the next generation news network powered by Theta. So if you would like to add to your Tfuel stack, and crypto is something we're definitely going to talk about today, you can call in 1-855-877-5112. And if you're the 4th caller in the queue, you will win 444 Tfuel, which is coming from the Zetetic News Guardian node that has been operating probably since 2019 or so. And currently one of the top 120 Guardian nodes on the network. And why is that important? Well, what we think is we're developing an alternative news distribution system that can be self-sustaining and sort of outside the control, in some sense, from big tech censorship, financial censorship, etc. And that can actually be a debate because there's so much going on in that sphere which might taint or skew that trajectory, and in fact I would say it has. I mean, we are streaming on YouTube right now. We're coming out of 3 months in live stream jail, which is sort of the subject, at least the leading subject of this show. We've how do you concatenate the last 3 months in a 3-hour show? It's almost impossible to cover all of that subject matter, but we're going to try. We're going to do, it's a very informal agenda. Sometimes the best conversations I have with Xavier are off air, when we're just not, there's no formal script or anything. So I thought it would be good for our return to take that style. But so we've already experienced big tech censorship. We're also celebrating reaching over 6,000 subscribers. So far surpassing a more numerologically coincident number like 4,444 subscribers. But you get the point. Like we're growing, and nevertheless, we could probably be a lot more viewed, more subscribed to if it weren't for big tech censorship. And then, the other subject is the Theta network, which we're, sort of hitching our wagon to, so to speak, in some ways, at least in a technological, in a financial way, we're trying to do that. And while there's still a lot of promise, it really remains to be seen whether Theta is this kind of like panacea of technology that can liberate and democratize and, provide incentives and means of distribution that are free from these factors. So, for example, we have the financial tyranny of the chaos created by the Treasury and the SEC and the CFTC and the Federal Reserve, which is impacting the volatility of crypto prices, which directly impacts the sort of quote-unquote business model that we're trying to develop with the Theta stake ownership that we have and our reward mechanism. But then also, not only have we sort of talked about, and there are some interesting tweets we could tie into this about, the idea of a company, Theta Labs, developing something that can truly be censorship free. They made an update to their EdgeNode software like yesterday, and basically removed the EdgeCast feature from the EdgeNode, which allowed us to be truly the first next generation news network streaming in a decentralized, censorless manner on a basically a bifurcated infrastructure, which was cool. Although, we're not getting, a bunch of funding from the viewers there, because there basically are none, one or two over a week's time, 3 or 4 maybe on a good week, will drop into the stream on that platform. But they made this update, and then in 10 minutes my EdgeNode was banned for fraud detection. And I didn't even mention this to you, Xavier, but it happened today, this morning, and I was like, wow, just in time for our stream tonight. And I did email support, and to their credit, they responded and said, we're aware of this issue, we're going to look into it. But everybody's noticing that EdgeCast is gone, and we thought, well, what in the world? This was like a big feature that they released. It seemed like their like bread and butter video streaming, and it was very, I thought there was a lot of potential in what they were trying, where they were trying to go with it. And now I'm just sort of scratching my head, what is going on behind the scenes that led to this, this update, which might be a bug, might not be a bug. I mean, we don't really know. Right. But these are the things that we're kind of dealing with, trying to get our platform noticed and get new and interesting guests on the show to talk about the subjects that these powers that be don't want you to be hearing about or us talking about. Right. So that was just sort of the housekeeping section. It's always changing fast, and we just have to adapt to it. Regardless, I still think the notion of a decentralized infrastructure that will more fairly reward creators and viewers for engaging with that content is market disrupting.
Oh, absolutely.
And the way we need to go. And maybe it's just a matter of time before these kinks are worked out.
And I think there's also just sort of like a precedence cloud a little bit over Theta specifically because of all of the library credit, Odyssey, decision that is like, oh no, these are basically illegal security sales, and you can't do that.
For those who are not initiated in the Library Odyssey thing, could you talk about that for a little bit?
So basically, library credits is a cool kind of content creator incentive payment mechanism that they recently, within the past, I guess it was about 3 years ago, integrated in with this alternative viewing platform, video platform called Odyssey. And it's not pronounced like the ancient literature piece by Homer, but it's Odyssee. And it's kind of like it's an alternative to YouTube that doesn't have the same kind of stringent oversight. It still has its own issues, but at the end of the day, it's at least an alternative. And they had this kind of cool tipping feature and view generating mechanism that allowed content creators to get this native cryptocurrency called library credits, or LBC is the ticker. And it's it was kind of a glaring target. It was kind of an easy target for the SEC to go after, because they're not like the biggest project. I mean, they're decent size as far as crypto projects go, but I don't even think that LBC is in the top 100 anymore. So that it's seen a lot of headwinds basically in implementation, and that's for obvious reasons. I mean, YouTube and Google, of course, don't want to relinquish any kind of market share from their monopoly, essentially centralized monopoly over content sharing. And it would be one thing if it really was kind of an open forum, but they cast all kinds of eggshells on the ground that people have to dance around in order to not be have their tongue cut out in a digital sense. So
isn't it amazing how much chaos can be caused by the SEC just sending a letter? You know what I mean? Like, these companies stand up, they've got a technology, they're psychologically inclined to understand the value for value proposition of a cryptocurrency. They're willing to accept a token, which is its namesake, a token. It's just a symbol of value in whatever system you're talking about. And the SEC wants to come in and say, it's actually this, it's actually that, which is what the IRS does as well with value exchange. And it's all in the semantics and linguistics that people get tripped up. And now we have it in the judicial process. Man, where do we start with that? I mean, FTX had already kind of imploded. There's all this, back and forth with Binance being in talks to buy them, then quote unquote pulling the rug at the last minute, which it turned out to be the last minute because it was that news that led to the precipitous drop in FTX and the subsequent unraveling of this media fabrication about SBF. And it's sad that it's only after the fact that this becomes mainstream awareness. I'm sure many were keen to the FTX chicanery way before it happened. I mean, I know Bix Weir, as an example, called it out. I mean, anybody who thinks Binance is some sort of like
golden ticket or something,
golden ticket or knight on in white armor or whatever, I mean, it's a joke. And the SEC gets to come in, and of course they get to pick their section of the code and apply it, because they know that these entities are engaged in some kind of code violation, but at the same time,
it's sort of
other entities are allowed to eschew that and get away with it. And so it's a very selective enforcement type of system. It's also, it's been said a million times, regulation by enforcement. Mm-hmm. And that is government. I mean, in essence, like, you think your driver's license is not regulation by enforcement?
It is. Because there's it's basically an arbitrary imposition of a licensure stranglehold
paradigm.
Yeah, and it sort of behooved the SEC, of course, to say that FTX, early on it was, this is a real green lit, open avenue. This is totally legit. It's got all the right backers. People from the investment community are chiming in, and there's Super Bowl ads, and everything was seemingly checked off the chart for these regulators. And then come to find out that their little darling exchange that was supposedly, clamoring for all this legislation to crack down on every other type of exchange or every other type of project, all of a sudden that got exposed, and then was like, okay, well, we're just going to dispose with this, and then use it to tar and feather the entire sector.
Right.
Use it as a scapegoat to say, we need so much more regulation. And they with FTX, pumping it up initially and creating a false flagship syndrome, basically allowed them to then use it as a bludgeon.
Yeah, I don't
for
even.
The rest of the sector.
Coinbase has been very vocal. Brian Armstrong talking about, we need guidance. Give us the guidance, please. Right. Well, have you ever considered, Brian, that the SEC doesn't actually want clear guidance?
Yeah,
they would
have given it by now.
This confusion, and they know that the average retail crypto investor is extremely ignorant and is in his shiny object chasing type of spender, and so never let a good crisis go to waste type of mentality. They are going to milk this. There is an innovation here. There is an innovation.
It's like schizo propaganda, because then immediately after all this FUD with the exchanges, BlackRock comes out and it's like, we're definitely going to be probably successfully, since we have a 590 to 1 success ratio, we're going to file for the Bitcoin ETF now.
What's the BlackRock guy? Forget Larry Fink, right? So he used to be very anti-Bitcoin, if I understand, in crypto in general, right?
He was of the Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett school.
So, I mean, but that school, we talk a lot about like the occult thespian society and how much of what we see in the mainstream media is staged, enacted by actors.
False representation.
Can we get an interview with Larry Fink to get him to explain what happened between when he was anti and when he was pro? Because all I've seen in like the crypto media and this and that is about his switch. Oh, he's now pro, so now you should be a bull. Mm-hmm. But I would rather know, why did he change his switch? What is it that he knows? And how long has he known it without making it publicly announced? Mm-hmm. And to what end? To what end did he withhold his revelations, if he even had them, or did he feign an anti-crypto stance earlier on for some ulterior motive? Like, these are the questions that people should be asking in the crypto community, in my opinion. Dave asking the stupid questions here, to get a better understanding and trajectory on the overall situation. Because a lot of people are saying now, XRP won their case. BlackRock and Fidelity and all these other TradFi entities are now lining up to set up their Bitcoin ETF, and this is going to set this major precedent. Mm-hmm. And we can use the XRP ruling to basically say none of this is a security. I think it's very naive. It's very foolhardy.
Yeah, I mean,
to make that conclusion.
The SEC will almost certainly try to appeal, and there'll be extra caveats, and they're going to try and, within their limited window of time, I think, between now and the end of next year, try and pull off some other major crackdown.
Right.
That seems to be their kind of strategy, is to, linger with this schizophrenic, confusion-based policy until it's just the market just decides for the SEC, essentially, and there's too much rejection and rebellion against these government bureaucrats trying to finagle emerging
One
markets.
thing that occurred to me is in regards to this very schizophrenic sort of trajectory of the powers that be in vis-a-vis the crypto situation, is the comments by Matthew Cratter basically saying that Bitcoin cannot be controlled. Essentially, the powers that be know this, and they're just doing what they can to gain as much control as they possibly can within that system, although they will fail. And I think there might be something to that, in the sense that we saw in 2017 Chris Giancarlo admit that, well, he didn't admit it in 2017, but he admitted later that in 2017 the powers that be, Trump and the Treasury and the CFTC, blah, 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 did create a market manipulation to quote-unquote pop the Bitcoin bubble. And I think there's some research which points to them gaining access to Mt. Gox Bitcoin in order to have the inventory to be able to short that market. Likewise, in 2023, we see this schizophrenic, this sort of bipolar position by, and just current events, things happening which create opportunities in the short term for purchases and acquisitions, positions which, if the powers that be have future plans down the road or foresee something with their modeling, etc., that they can take advantage of in terms of that gaining of control, they would absolutely do that. And so this sort of pump and dump action that people see in the Bitcoin market, I do think it has to be related to these entities who are, as far as I know, it is factual that there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin, and there are constraints on how that comes about, and many of the holders of Bitcoin are ideologically aligned to hodling rather than selling their holdings to what they might perceive to be nefarious entities. And Bitcoin at this point, and this might be the same perception by the powers that be, is sort of it is money in the crypto economy de facto. Like, you can argue, is Bitcoin redeemable in goods and services that you would buy in the everyday? But nobody would argue that you can't exchange Bitcoin for any other token in the crypto economy. Right. So
you can buy gold with it. You can
buy a lot with it. And I'm not making the argument it's not useful in that, because it is convertible. Yeah. I mean, to a certain limit. I haven't tried to cash in 10 million Bitcoin or whatever, so I have no idea how hard that would be, but so there are probably limits there that are inhibiting broader adoption. But I think as far as crypto is concerned, you could probably buy any amount of crypto that you want with Bitcoin, right? So as far as control goes, I think the powers that be, if they see Bitcoin as continuing its dominant position, as being a first market mover and innovator and a limited supply and all of that, then maybe that pump and dump action is just more, they're just basically turning on their algorithmic trading programs that they use for every other security to the Bitcoin. And they have advanced modeling, sentiment analysis, and forecasting capabilities that the average retail investor doesn't have. I mean, most people are thinking about what they're going to eat, for the get together on the weekend, rather than 10 months down the road. They don't have those tools, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing with Bitcoin, we've espoused a couple different ideas about it in previous episodes, but one of those ideas is that it kind of was essentially a beta test and it acts as a kind of beta test to get people in a more acclimated pattern of thinking around value being digitally based. And that it's possible that this was kind of a little bit of a gamble, you might say, after the 2008 financial scripted collapse of, temporary scripted collapse of the housing market, which never actually fully corrected on a technical level. That's because they started QE and almost instantaneously. The whole TARP bailout stuff. What the public thinks of as the numbers associated with that, it's actually much higher, and we're actually seeing the echoes of the same kind of conditions beginning, but on a much higher, more potentially volatile and grave basis, because in a lot of ways, you could kind of see Bitcoin as a private economic savings mechanism a little bit, and a wealth generation potential income bearing instrument that in the event of a collapsing economy acts as a kind of disaster insurance on the legacy financial structures, whether that's employment, housing, energy costs, et cetera. So in a way, and RFK Jr. sort of described it like this, and I think it's sort of superficially true that Bitcoin acts as a kind of disaster insurance within the legacy financial system, but at the same time, it could also be a Trojan horse in the sense that it's acclimating the population to disaster economics, essentially, and that as we were saying before, a lot of the bread and butter of the paradigm is order out of chaos. They need to stimulate chaotic conditions in order to provoke a calculated reaction that they anticipate, so that they can pretend to come up with a solution that they already had ahead of time. And so Bitcoin could be one of these things where it's seen as this, great escape from the financial system. And on one level, it very well could be that. But on another level, it could create a whole new level of dependency amongst the population when it comes to digital economics and screenification of consciousness. And VR, AR.
Yeah, nobody can deny that.
Yeah.
I mean, because some of the detractors of Bitcoin will say, well, we're headed towards a situation where you might not even have the internet. You might not even have the electricity. A very catastrophic. And
I don't think that's the biggest threat, though. I think the biggest threat is that everything continues kind of according to plan. We get even more digitized. We get even more enmeshed and embedded.
Yeah, you've talked about the Microsoft patent on crypto, like
biological
biometrics, basically
biometric-based blockchain tech
based on exhalation.
Yeah,
So when you hear
that's pretty unnerving.
When you hear Bill Gates talk about the danger of cow farts, you get a window into his thinking about the population and how we should be really managing the population.
Because think about it. I mean, if we did get a Bitcoin standard, you would have all kinds of technological, capabilities for people themselves to become the new mining rigs with their activity.
Yeah, I mean, look at OnlyFans.
Yeah, right. That's an example of that. So that's a digital economic sort of wealth generation tool that could be rolled out in all kinds of highfalutin ways that we can't anticipate right now. So,
right.
There's every sword cuts two ways. There's a potentially positive slice, which is, look, like if central banks are basically trapped in a corner and they've got no other option but to essentially buttress their hypothetical reserves with something that has a deflationary economic model, then that would kind of necessitate huge pricing increases over the next decade. But by the same token, that precipitous rise would lead in all sorts of financial dependency and exodus from maybe a more diversified or potentially resilient portfolio mindset. Because if for example, this sort of genie comes out of the bottle about unemployment numbers and real inflation metrics, and the interest rates are could continue to go up in a way that people aren't necessarily forecasting right now at a later date, and ultimately there's just this huge bottleneck that emerges where the legacy financial system has to be essentially tapered out because the debt is too overwhelming. The only way for that to really get rehypothecated and redenominated in a new system is with a ready-made digiconomy, essentially, ready to go online. And it seems like crypto is that kind of new stock market, in a sense. That Bitcoin is kind of like the new Dow Jones in some ways, where if all these corporations start to tokenize, all of that wealth will be transferred onto this new system, and then everyone becomes that much more dependent on it. So in a way, it could be better because it's less, government intervention, direct intervention in the marketplace, less bureaucracy, et cetera, et cetera. But on the flip side of it, is it could become so digitally monolithic that risk rises in proportion with convenience and comfort of a new system being rolled out, where the debts of the past are kind of jubilated or sort of dissolved in some way, and value is rehypothecated in this new, much more volatile and risky kind of casino economy that's digitally based, where there isn't like protections and assurance around money, but there's a lot of ability to generate huge amounts of wealth at the same time. So it's kind of a Wild West thing that the elite may not even really have a choice in preventing. They are positioning themselves to kind of create a plausible deniability structure around its rollout, I think.
We're not the only ones talking about a reset.
Yeah.
Okay. Conspiracy theorists have talked, quote unquote, about a reset for a long time. Now you have the WEF talking about a great reset. Whichever side you're on, it's coming. One way or the other. Whether it's a force majeure planned economy, or it is a creative destructive event of multifactorial aspects. It is coming, and the question is, what is being destroyed and what is being created? And I think there is I take the perspective that a lot of it is determined by us and how we react to what we are experiencing. But at the same time, no one can deny, I would never deny that there are entities who are trying to bring this event about in a way that is controlled to their favor.
For sure.
And so that's really what I'm after, is trying to understand, the motives and trajectories behind all that, so that I can prepare myself correctly. You talked about the digitization of everything, and it reminded me of a recent episode that I watched of Black Mirror. They have a new season out, and I don't know how new it is because I don't really watch mainstream, but it might be several months old. But this episode's called Joan is Awful. I haven't seen this preview. I'm going to play it just because I'm sure you haven't heard of it. But it basically evidences a surveillance state that is able to monitor everything that happens to you, and because of all the the user rights that you signed away when you signed up for the services that you wanted, like Ring, and your smartphone, and what you agree to when you work for your employer, everything is basically filmed and recorded. And who needs a creative writer on a Hollywood set anymore when they can just monitor the most interesting interactions that happen in every day? Because what is the adage? Art imitates life. So if life is completely censored, not censored, well, maybe, but surveilled rather, the creative potential in terms of entertainment. And so let me just play this clip. Hopefully this preview, gives you a glimpse of what I'm talking about.
You're letting me go? Okay, but I'm still working on my audio compression algorithm.
Unfortunately, the board feels compression algo isn't a thing that they want to do.
Okay. Well, without it, we'll need more data sets.
I know.
Which means a bigger carbon will breach all of our environmental pledges.
I'm sorry, it's how I feel.
I just put a deposit down at the apartment.
I'm sure this hasn't been an easy decision.
Joan, please don't do this. Please, not now. I can't. I thought we were friends.
Okay, just gonna give you a minute to compose yourself.
I feel pretty composed.
I am so sorry.
I invited you to the housewarming, Joan.
I've asked Brutus to escort her out.
Oh, God.
I'll help you with your things, Sandy.
So that clip didn't show it very well, but basically this happens to this woman, Joan, at work. She goes home and is watching Amazon Prime or Netflix. It's called like Streamberry or something in the show, but it's just, it looks, the logo just looks just like Netflix, and she ends up watching this show that's served up to her, which depicts this woman, Joan, firing this woman in the workplace, and they make it so it's basically it turns out to be an AI generated show.
Yeah.
And she tries to sue Streamberry because she feels defamed. Everyone's watching this show. It's like the hottest thing, and everybody is like aghast at, because they associate it directly with her because it's based on her. This whole, it's AI took the images and the audio that was recorded from this whole interaction and built a whole story on it, and then produced a show without a single actor actually doing anything at all. And
gosh, and it could be whipped up intraday.
Yeah, you get a super cluster,
studio time and rehearsals. So, and wow,
she ends up going on this like journey to like find the central servers that are running this AI that propagated this show, which in her mind defamed her. And I'm just sitting there like, when we talk about the digitization of human interaction, and Xavier's putting on his sunglasses now, I wish y'all could see it. He's just like, they live.
I mean, seriously, it's kind of alarming because
it's very alarming.
Revelation of the method. I mean, that is something that Black Mirror has always had a reputation for, is sort of presaging or
something that's just around the corner.
Something that's just around the corner. And I mean,
it was actually stated before this season came out that the producer directors didn't really know what to do for the next show because they felt like okay, sure.
Well, everything had just happened to come true. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Y'all don't have
we had
any
no
inside
insight. Exactly.
at all, right,
I knew you would see what I'm saying with that.
Yeah. No, that's definitely a good point. I mean, because AI, it's one of these violations of the precautionary principle. You know, we've talked about it in previous episodes.
Elaborate on precautionary before you go on for our uninitiated.
So the idea that it's probably a good idea to wait on certain innovations or advancements,
quote unquote,
right, with certain questions and a kind of idea of seeing what the potential risks might be, with all kinds of preliminary digestion, essentially.
Any
the
public
issue.
policy that's to be enacted needs
Right.
to have a consensus from the scientific community. Which when is there ever? When is there ever?
Well, they like to manufacture consensus all the time.
Yes.
But it's the idea that there has to be more risk assessment on levels that are not necessarily initially considered or advertised as well, of course we should let this technological innovation or advancement go forward. What do we have to lose? What could possibly go wrong? I mean, that's where the precautionary principle comes in. Is, well, actually A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K things could go wrong, and here's maybe some pause in assessing what it is this development could happen. And the thing is about AI is, I think it's not really fully what they say it is, but it's probably going to become that thing in a way that they can't necessarily prevent or entirely control. And that is maybe part of the whole Lokian or just wild and unhinged desire to capitalize off of various forms of subterfuge and chaos that they deem alchemically interesting to experiment amongst the population and on human destiny, and really the nature of the world and reality as such. So I think that they see it as a giant playground, and they have for a long time. They have for over 100 years. I mean, just look at the invention of breakfast food, right? I mean, Edward Bernays, he was responsible for the popularization of bacon and pancakes and orange juice. These things were not really considered breakfast food, in the late 1800s. They weren't even really considered food. Like, people didn't really want, the scraps of this or the chaff flour from that.
Right.
I mean, it just goes to show that perceptions can be managed and massaged to such an extent over time that people think that this managed massage perception that they have is just like an intrinsic or like a natural point of view.
You actually taught me the term homunculus.
Yes.
Before I found this excellent entry by Mind Unveiled about homunculus, which was posted 1 month ago. So shout out to Mind Unveiled. They did a 10-hour.
I've only gotten like a third of the way through.
Right.
I'm still looking at it.
Right. But the idea that the alchemists, the powers that be, the grand priest class,
Yes.
what is it, the hidden hand behind the throne, or
Right.
these various terms, these people you'll never hear about. Hunter Biden is low totem pole.
He's
okay, these
a
are
failed henchman.
yeah. These people are trying to create artificially intelligent beings way before large language models or anything of that nature.
Yeah.
So when I look at AI and its propagation and development, I see it as more of a data collection effort.
Definitely. Just
like Google was sort of, you might say AI 1.0 or 0.01, 0.1, something like that.
Right.
Because they wanted thoughts. They wanted, what are you thinking about? What are you saying? How are you transacting? All of that information, what is the saying? If the service is free, you're the product.
Yes.
Basically. And homunculus, you can give a better treatise on homunculus in its historical context. And of course, Mind Unveiled would go, I would argue, even deeper than maybe Xavier here. But there were various attempts. It's my little Dave synopsis. Various attempts way before most people would imagine to create some sort of like AI being, some sort of like Frankenstein creation that would serve the elites. Maybe it was a groom of the stool. Who would wipe the butt of the king. I don't know, like what the ultimate intentions and motivations were, but Mind Unveiled does a really good job of documenting, like in hard fashion, the many attempts to engineer these beings. And now with the fertility crisis that we're seeing, how many people do you know had to get IVF to have kids? And that's just the tip of the iceberg. You have test tube babies. You have attempts at like merging two males' genetics to create a gay baby. You have
septuples.
Sex reassignment surgeries attempting to enable the opposite sex to have kids. You have the attempt to grow babies in pods, which we covered way back, probably 2019, 2020. We were talking about that as being a future licensure paradigm as well. This thrust to regulate procreation itself, and
they're way behind on that. They've wanted to be much more cracked down on procreation by now. And
I tend to agree with you.
And I think that some of these exigent cultural developments pertaining to gender, this, that, and the other, this is kind of a backdoor way of at least curbing population growth in the short to medium term, but ultimately creating a psychology that is rooted in a form of militant antinatalism that, if popularized over time, over a generation or something, would precipitate the power of suggestion that, well, look, we all know that it's crazy to have a kid.
Right.
So we might as well license and tax and set up a bureaucratic process around this ancient, arcane, heinous activity of birthing children out of a body. So you see early realizations of this agenda through the Fabian Socialists, Huxley, Brave New World. They've wanted to be a little bit farther ahead of embryological control, but in a way they've replaced it with cosmological control. So it's almost like they're trying to prime the pump a little bit, or shape the thinking and the imagination of the population for many generations before rolling out these more hardcore biological control mechanisms, which I think maybe is a smarter long-term strategy, because if you were to, try to control embryology as a front,
you're not going to do it in a generation.
You're not going to do it in a generation or two. It actually has to take a long time of boiling the frog on multiple levels. So I do think that is a Agenda 2040, Agenda 2050 type thing. Is after all the climate lockdowns and the huge repopulation crisis, because it's not they want to think of it as we're helping the planet. They want to advertise it as we're helping the oblate spheroid, which, oh my gosh, later in the episode there is an anagram within.
I saw that.
Did you see that?
Yes,
there's
I
an
did.
Anagram within.
Did you come up with that?
I decoded that. I decoded it.
Okay.
So we'll
I
eventually get to that,
have
but
more material
yeah.
on that later.
Yeah, but essentially the idea is, we're helping Mother Gaia, Goddess Orb, in cleansing the world of excess human activity and excess numbers, and we're going to come back to a balance with nature, and we're going to know the cosmos better at that point, and we're going to fulfill our destiny and go to the stars. And this is all part of the New Age that's been propagandized and polemicized through environmentalism and social engineering for well over 100 years at this point.
Since our last episode, I think we've been most active on Twitter. In discussing some of the subject material which we cover, but not all. We're more focused on Twitter. It seems like there's a lot of activity on disputing the shape of the Earth. Mm-hmm. But in some of those discussions, I've seen grand hand waving dismissals of the idea that it is being psychologically inculcated. The idea of a limited number of children, saving the earth, it's amoral to bring about children, yada yada yada. But I don't even have time for disputes of that information, because it is a fact. Like, they inculcate people to believe it is amoral to reproduce because it's a burden on the earth. And not just that they inculcate people to that, but people are actually living that out. They're carrying that agenda out in their everyday life because this is how they've been inculcated, And
and they're given a false superiority complex through these.
I have experienced it
appeals.
myself, firsthand. Not only would I even say I was a victim of it earlier on.
I was probably
earlier on. So
stuff.
Anybody who wants to say I'm unreasonable for coming to these conclusions, just understand, I was on that side at some point. I was a victim. I call myself a victim of the anti-family agenda. Mm-hmm. At one point I thought I shouldn't ever have kids.
Yeah.
And I came to realize the only way to kind of better the society is to create better people.
Right.
And what easier way to do that than to have my own kids?
And to, bestow a sense of betterment on the next generation.
Yeah.
Right. But that's the thing is, responsibility is an evil, patriarchal, cis male fetish that needs to be banished so we can heal the world. You see, the family has been such a horrible burden on everyone. I mean, how many people do you know that have trying relations with their family? That's direct evidence that the family has been this aberration.
Better to abort them than to have them and not care for them.
Better dead than fried.
Even though you have many examples of people who were born and not cared for. I'm not endorsing that. I'm not saying we should encourage that, but it does happen, and humans persevere. They actually, some of them become the most revered in our society. You look at someone like Mike Tyson, who, by the way, has the record on ZNN for the most views of any video we've ever published.
He does.
Saying the word nigger.
Right.
Okay. And he was the product of a sex worker. He never knew his father, really. He rose to prominence. He's now actually seen as somewhat of a thought leader.
Interestingly enough, and he brings up a good point in that video. He lays a smackdown on this,
Kenan Thompson.
Oh,
that.
Oh no, you can't use that. That's you subjugating yourself. It's like, says who?
Says who? Not me. I don't feel that way.
I'm gonna own it because I like the way it sounds, and I like to refer myself in that way. Like, who are you to try and control my language? I feel like that's a great idea.
I've got Jeff Goldblum here from Jurassic Park. He had a famous quote: "Life finds a way," and I think it's very apropos, right? Because like you said, their depopulation management agenda is way behind where they wanted it to be, and that's maybe they thought people would stop fucking in COVID times. They actually did more fucking,
right?
And the sterilization program has not been as successful as maybe they had hoped it would be.
The pornification of human relations hasn't set in to the extent that they want it to, even though it is abominable and it is a problem. It hasn't replaced the desire for sexual intimacy like the agendas wanted it to.
Right.
They wanted it to basically be a simulacrum.
The soyification.
Right.
Is only leading to new economic opportunities for testosterone enhancement,
right?
Drugs and things of that nature. To Jeff Goldblum's point, life finds a way, and I think that will persist.
There is a lot of kind of hoisting by their own petard a little bit. That does happen. So with these social engineering objectives, they roll them out, and it has deleterious effects. But then there are ripple effects that they don't necessarily take into account that I think over the long haul come back to bite them in the ass. Which I think that's just kind of poetic justice or karma or whatever you want to chalk it up to on a metaphysical level. But there is a kind of oh no, my agenda is getting upset because gym culture is coming back, and we have to be emasculating. We have to be we have to be weakening the population, and now maybe we went too far in pushing this particular.
I think maybe it's a case of the propagandists at the top are getting so old.
Yeah,
that they are getting out of touch, and it's like the propaganda isn't convincing anymore, and people realize like, okay, this is not healthy. This is not something I want to pursue.
Right.
Nobody looks attractive, and
Right.
Even the drug advertisements are just so absurd.
The entire advertisement is a disclaimer about how badly it could hurt you.
But they have like really healthy, vibrant looking people in the advertisements, and it's like, this does not line up with what I see out in the real world. Yeah. So, but hey, we do have a call in.
Excellent.
Okay. We are roughly an hour into the first hour of the show. We appreciate all the folks tuning in, live streaming on YouTube only right now. We've had some technical difficulties. Also, our edge node was banned on Theta, and we're working on that.
Trying to get that restored.
So for tonight, we're just going to be on YouTube, but that's okay. We appreciate you guys listening in and calling in. We have a 978 area code here. It's the first call-in of the night. Remember, we are offering a 444 Tfuel award to the fourth caller, celebrating our 4th year in operation as Zetetic.news, the first next generation news network powered by Theta. If you like this content, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share, and maybe even comment on whatever it is we're talking about at the point you're listening. If we don't get 4 call-ins, I will be more than happy to give 444 Tfuel to this caller, Mr. 978 area code. Please state your name and, if you're comfortable, location and what it is you'd like to talk about. It can be related to what we've talked about, or a question you have, or whatever you want.
Open forum.
Oh, okay. So this is Riley Ross.
My man Riley!
What's up, Riley?
Good to hear from you again, man. How you been?
And I think this is my fourth time. I just got out of a pretty it's kind of hard to explain. I'm sort of in the middle of it'll be kind of hard to explain, but hopefully I just got debt-related situation.
Okay.
But what I was interested in discussing a couple things, like I've been in kind of like on the fence of how I feel about XLM, XDC, and whether that's something people should be supporting, or whether that's something perhaps connected. A lot of people right now are claiming that, the new name of Twitter, X, might have something to do with that. I think you made a good point when you say that, a lot of people kind of are cheering about XRP without enough knowledge, and even if XRP is a big thing, whether that would really be or something better to avert.
Yeah, I mean, the XRP, the corporate, it's set up in a very centralized way. I mean, I think that they're even kind of touting that, our platform is the exact right platform for CBDCs to be rolled out, and you can have digital tokens that are issued that expire and completely disappear, after a certain period of time. And I mean, they're already apparently working with Palau or something to create its own sort of, pilot test for a CBDC type rollout on their platform. So they're kind of big gov crypto a little bit, because they're all about compliance. They're all about, saying no, we're actually part of the program, guys. Don't crack down on us. Do I think that the price could necessarily go up if there's a huge implementation of this kind of thing? Sure. From an investment point of view, it might prove to be profitable in, the medium to long term. But we also just don't know the resiliency of this particular company, or how transparent it really operates, or, all of this kind of stuff. So
my take on that, and I haven't heard that before, as the Twitter X rebranding being related to the XRP ruling, if that's your implication. My gut feeling on the rebranding, and maybe Elon has a golden touch or something, but the X rebrand made no sense to me. I've been a part of companies who rebranded themselves. They didn't rename themselves, but they rebranded their marketing material, meaning that they changed their logo, they changed their color scheme, they changed their tagline, and all of that. And I was a part of a company that was much, 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 much smaller than Twitter, and they spent upwards of $10 million on a logo refresh, a tagline refresh, all that stuff I just described. Okay, and this is ostensibly to improve their market position. And with X, okay, Twitter, what is Twitter? Twitter is just a discussion forum. You have so many other discussion forums. You've got Reddit, you've got Gab, you've got YouTube, you've got Facebook, you've got a number of others that I'm not even mentioning. And Twitter, yeah, okay, the user interface, but you can scalp that talent. That talent to create that same kind of user interface is out there. But more than anything, you have two things: brand recognition. Tweeting is a verb now. Twitter is a noun now. And then on Twitter, you have an audience. And this has been said about many platforms. You can recreate the application, but you can't recreate the audience. So, for example, Theta can create a better YouTube. They can technologically create a better YouTube, but they can't take that audience. They have to convince that audience to come over. So, Twitter, I think Elon probably thinks that they've already got the audience, so they can name it whatever they want. Yes, they can do that, but at the same time, like, you're giving away all this brand recognition. You're naming it X, which is what? The unknown variable in an algebra equation. You don't know what X is. X is whatever. To me, it's stupid. Tweet is a verb, Twitter is a noun, and you're just giving that away. And I'm actually surprised he can make this change without, I guess there's board approval, I guess there's shareholder approval. I don't know if they're involved in that, but it seemed very ridiculous to me. He was involved with PayPal, and I know that there was a X.com or a Zoom.com that was part of that, and he's talking about this. It's going to be 50% of the financial system. Yeah, right. Maybe it's tied into something we don't know yet, but on its face, I thought it was ridiculous and kind of a misstep in my opinion. But to Xavier's point, when Elon speaks, people listen, whether they should or not. And if he, points that behemoth of Twitter audience and, in a certain direction, who knows what will happen to a certain crypto price. We were talking off air about Doge in that equation. Now Riley's bringing up XRP.
Ultimately, if he's going to say that it's a half the financial system and he has this money transmitter license through Twitter Payments LLC, he could honestly just greenlight the entire crypto sector onto this new everything app, which it seems like a WeChatification of U.S. social media.
Well, yeah, the thing that concerned me is mainly the fact. Well, I feel the name X, because it's such a basic name, that generally implies the goal of centralization, and there's been implications of saying that trying to turn Twitter into the new YouTube and things like that, kind of like what you mentioned, and and we've also seen, in 2021, how easily Elon Musk manipulates, at least the crypto market. People definitely, there's a lot of people, particularly I'd say on the right wing, who just believe that he's such a good guy all the time. And
it's just sort of laughable.
Not that I don't believe there's such a thing as one person ever being that bad, but I guess I do worry about form, not just money wise, but even the idea of turning Twitter into the new place for video, and I feel like that might be the goal.
Oh yeah, it definitely is. You have Zuckerberg trying to dunk on Elon. There's even this ridiculous oh yeah, I'm gonna fight you. You know, like when and where. You know, they're gonna do a cage match or something. They're talking about MMA, but it's sort of a joke. But who knows? You know, these days it seems like the Bernaysian project of merging the political with the celebrity class has gone into hyperdrive, and it's now including the billionaire class as like showpieces to distract the public. And you know, Zuckerberg is trying to do threads and kind of be like, oh, well, Facebook probably, you know, has just as much, if not more, users than Twitter, so I'm just gonna create basically the same interface over here and call it something different. And you know, I'm gonna basically flip the bird to Elon, but then Elon is like, oh yeah, well watch me brand pivot here, and I've got all the resources to make it into something even bigger than Facebook. And
I actually think their fight is going to be VR. They're going to be avatars. You know, this guy Indochamp on Instagram. I'll try to pull him up while I'm talking, but he's a bodybuilder, and he had a fight with Roy Jones Jr. Where he advertised it as a fight, and they did somewhat fight, but they like fought on a recorded boxing ring, and then it was projected as a VR like avatar fighting.
Really?
And he got a lot of flack for it. He fought Roy Jones Jr., who's a very well accoladed professional boxer, and then he got basically lambasted by the community for his fake promotion of it. That's not the video, but he came out and said, well, I said this was like an experimental video project, and it ended up being like a VR avatar type of event. Like, people saw 3D characters animated by AI using the video projection, and I don't even see the point if you're actually videoing the fight or whatever. But I can totally see the Elon Zuck fight match materializing into that sort of hologram Joe type paradigm, because we basically have a hologram president as well.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah. I haven't heard people talk about. I feel like I haven't heard people talk about Biden in at least a year. People don't really care. People like Elon Musk are more important, I think, at this point than any president.
Right, which is what's kind of interesting about him as a sort of wild card in some ways. Is sort of a NWO maverick a little bit, because he's definitely part of the establishment on a lot of fronts. I mean, the whole transhumanist agenda and brain chipping and environmentally friendly electric cars and we're going to power your home through solar batteries and stuff. I mean, yeah, he's all about that.
I think in particularly some of the blue states like California, they're trying to slowly really enforce Teslas on people.
Mm-hmm. Well, but then he's also trying to kind of pander to more of the moderate to right sort of crowd, the sort of anti-wokist crowd a little bit simultaneously.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And how genuine it is, you just can't really put a whole lot of stock in these, pedestaled billionaire types kind of posturing about, politics and culture and, society. I mean, every one of these billionaires in the media gets velvet glove treatment. They get the Rockefeller treatment. They're lifted up as, oh, what a genius investor, or what an incredible computer guru, or what an amazing innovator. there's always some kind of like religious tone that is applied to these super wealthy individuals, at least the big ones, the big names that people know. And in that sense, they're kind of a part of the occult thespian network to some sense, because they serve this purpose of being grand kind of scions or leaders that the people sort of look to. So, and this is now like a sort of authoritarian kind of social engineering that operates independent of the illusion of consent. So it's almost like by popularizing these strong men or these super wealthy, uber internationalist types, that's a kind of philosophical programming or political programming for the people to just kind of care less and less about how they're being represented or how resources are being managed, or what the future for this or that industry is. Well, we've got these titans of technology leading us, and so it's kind of you need a strongman political culture combined with this lionization of wealth to create a technotronic era or a technocratic control grid that is seemingly supported or at least tacitly allowed by the people. Because if you hypnotize people with the awe and the splendor of this technological wealth, then it kind of creates a society that condones that kind of wealth discrepancy, for example, amongst the uber 0.0000001 percenters who are just paraded around in front of people as these people with grand achievements, when in fact, well, pretty much all of them are astroturfed. Pretty much all of them have had some kind of huge disproportionate leg up or advantage that allowed them to get to that position, and none of that's talked about. It's just, what a grand innovator, what an amazing genius, what a shrewd investor,
I really understand when people who are like in horrible financial situations act as if they are hard on themselves in certain ways, where think that they should be working harder, when really it's just that things are not usually just don't admit that they sort of have something ingrained in them to realize that it's probably just a class-related issue as to why they're poor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, pre-existing trends in wealth disparity have a lot more staying power than the exceptional kind of flashes in the pan of people rising out of their, otherwise underclass sort of position to something of more prominence. I mean, certainly there's going to be, deviations against the broader trend, but I mean, the broader trend is that more and more wealth is getting aggregated to fewer and fewer percentage points of people. And it's already been calculated that at current trends, by 2040, the top 0.1%, I mean, not even the 1%, the 0.1% will control nearly 40% of the world's wealth. I mean, that's gargantuan disparity there. I mean, it's totally unprecedented. I mean, and really, I was thinking about this earlier over the hiatus, but we rail against the pyramid as this horrible symbol of hegemony and power over the people, all-seeing eye and stuff. But in fact, if you were to graph the economic distribution model, a pyramid is a relatively just model in terms of wealth distribution. What we have today is more like an obelisk. It's more like a huge tack base, which is just the underclass of everyone, and then this crazy spike pinnacle that goes all the way to the top. I mean, in a way, if resources were actually distributed in a pyramid formation, we probably have a lot more harmony in the world. It's kind of interesting that
because the person at the top gets the same as the bottom
in terms of support.
Right.
Right. And so the thing about an obelisk or like a thumbtack formation is that it's the wealth is so like spiked away from the vast majority of people, and that the threshold whereby that spike occurs is extremely limited and gate kept.
Yeah,
So-
you're either at the top or you're not.
Right.
Basically, and
Right.
there's no gradient. There's no like middle ground.
Not a lot, at least. I mean, in other
Comparatively.
words, yeah, comparatively speaking,
Yeah, I just want to take a moment and appreciate this little clip of Elon. I don't know where he did this interview or when. I gather it's relatively recent.
yeah, this is the one about.
But here he goes about X.
Essentially, if done right, the X would be would serve people's financial needs to such a degree that over time it would, I don't know, maybe half of the global financial, well, or some big number. The numbers were pretty big. So it would be far the biggest sort of financial institution. Like I said, not really in the way that people are used to thinking about banks. Just the efficient data for the thing that is money. They said like it's a matter of fraud. Everything's real time, and if it involves money in any way, it can be dealt with on one location.
And I just want to juxtapose that with a clip from our intro sequence, which is the subject of his shirt. Okay, so this is from our intro video. It's lagging a little bit. There it is.
oh yeah,
The Tesla PR stunt that he brought about and is promoting with his T-shirt.
yeah,
Typical corporate lackey,
maneuver. Right.
and it's so. What did he say? It looks so fake. That's how you know it's real.
Right. You know it's real because of how fake it looks.
Right. And I don't trust him. You know, at this point, the whole takeover and his propagation on the platform itself might just be another AI program. Maybe they trained a large language model on everything he's ever said and everything that he's ever, been recorded to say in his various dealings with his myriad companies. I mean, that is something that someone like this, a technocrat, would have at his disposal.
Oh yeah.
And when he's propagating things like Neuralink, this interface, which would really bring about, again, we talked earlier about if the service is free, you're the product, this digitization of existence itself. Twitter is Neuralink 0.1.
Correct.
Or 0.01 or 0.02 or something like that.
Right.
And yeah, now he wants to get into money. Well, who else doesn't? I mean, Microsoft, Apple, Meta, and what are they all also building? VR, AI, existences, avatar existences, which brings us back to something we played and been copyright banned years ago at this point, Ready Player One.
Yep.
By Steven Spielberg. I won't play the trailer. Y'all can look it up.
Revelation of the Method.
It is pure revelation of the
there
method.
was
I haven't
a,
even seen the movie. I don't
There
need
was a
to.
video between Robert Hartley and Big Dog where Robert Hartley kept saying, was comparing possible future to Ready Player One, and he said that he felt like there was some logo in it called GSS, as it might symbolize Google, Samsung, Sony.
Yeah, I mean, go back to, I forget what episode number it was, but one of the episodes we did was word of the day was theta. And I think in my opening I talked about the different synonyms for theta. One of them being theta wave, the brain wave that you put off in sleep state. And, you know, Wes Levitt, the head of strategy at Theta, is kind of hand waved and said, you know, he made up something about, well, he said something about their sort of incidental creation of the word theta for their protocol. But I suspect, as what's that guy, Robbie Sullivan on Twitter, shout out to him, he's got some interesting posts. You know, he thinks Wes is a deep state DARPA agent, basically, to gatekeep the theta innovation. But like him, I suspect that the term theta is used for much deeper reasons than whatever it was that Wes said. It was very incidental and surface level and kind of...
I remember thinking this. Well, I've had the same, a couple, not that I necessarily have a specific theory like that. I do know one person said that the word theta has a lot to do with Scientology, so it could be that Scientologist, because like American Idol also is very Scientologist, and they were working with them for NFTs.
Oh yeah, Thetans. Right. That's interesting. And Scientology is much more ensconced in a lot of different areas than you'd think. I mean, of course, the basis for Scientology is it's really kind of a offshoot of kind of Freemasonic, Crowleyite ideas. Hubbard, of course, is a sort of an acolyte of Crowley, so it's going to carry with it some weird kind of left-hand cosmology stuff, Thanatoid hyperbole and apocalypticism and catastrophizing and all this stuff that is common in almost all world religions. So it's interesting that you'd see that connection with some of these emerging techno platforms, because Scientology is almost like a revelation of the method in itself. It is based on completely asinine, fabricated cosmological, fairy tales, essentially. But it touts itself as this very serious, hardcore, empirical method to better people's lives. So it's using science in a religious capacity, or at least the presentation and the veneer of scientific expertise or knowledge, which is a little bit of a tip-off as to how the broader control grid is able to maintain such predominance. And this dovetails in with another point that I had, which is that the best religions, or the most long-standing and strongest form of religious control, is faiths in which believers contend that their belief or their dogma is knowledge in and of itself, that what they believe is indistinguishable from knowledge, which is also kind of like contradictory, because beliefs aren't knowledge. But the best forms
sounds like a self-help book.
Right, yeah, well, self-help, landmark form, they all use similar techniques to this, which is they tear you down in order to build you back up. Yeah.
Oh, well, I feel like a lot of the time, a lot of people, I sometimes wonder whether, Satan actually, not that I would consider myself a Satanist or know much about it, but I sometimes wonder if, the real reason they're doing this type of, Satanism is really because there might be good things about Satanism that other religions try to get people away from. Because I have heard from some people that Crowley, I've heard stories of him, having, doing things to children. But I also have heard that like he and people of Satan were trying to basically encourage freedom, and people didn't like that. And I think that if any belief system, or I don't think you need a belief system, but like I think if it really is something that supports freedom, then I would say I am in favor of it.
Well, just the term though that's applied and the label that's applied to the ideas is kind of it's sort of hackneyed or sort of cloying in the first place, because this whole theological bifurcation between this fallen angel who rebels but is still kind of under the control of and the operates on behalf within creation from this ultimately good God. So in other words, Satan is sort of the controlled opposition to a God figure that allows the operation of evil for the supposed betterment of God's plan. So it's like Satan is sort of just like the bouncer for God in a lot of ways. He goes around and sort of tests people, and if they fail, then that's a justification for them to be damned, and God approves. So, and then ultimately the term Satan just means adversary, and some things you have to be adversarial against, right? I mean, you can't just accept everything that comes down the pike. So on the one, some people advertise Satanism as this kind of libertarian, mystical libertarianism or something, but you can also just see it as adversarialism, contrarianism, inversionism, just kind of going against whatever the grain is that's set up as normal or good or to be expected or that sort of thing. So there's a kind of like huckster or sort of trickster component to this label a little bit. Like it's a pigeonhole in one sense, because you're still operating within the whole kind of Judeo-Christian nexus by referring to yourself as a Satanist, and you kind of pin that cosmology on your belief structure and your behavior, when in reality a lot of what Satanism is kind of just adversarial perfectibilism or illuminism, repackaged in this kind of edgy, kind of dark inversion of Christian ideas. And really a lot of the concepts are derivative from much older philosophies and thought forms. So I don't know. I think that the label is kind of problematic for some of the ideas that are in there, because you can trace the ideas back to things that didn't have anything to do with the cosmology that's attached to the belief system. So that's kind of my little religious caveat there. Like a lot of things within Satanism are dependent on Christian dogma and Christian doctrine in order to be seen as part of its philosophy. So it's sort of a derivative notion.
Also, many of the adherents don't even go 1/10 of that depth. I mean, you listen to someone like Eddie Bravo, and he was like, "Yeah, I was a Satanist, but we were just into heavy metal, and we like to scare people."
Exactly.
And, it was just kind of like they didn't think at all about the philosophy behind it. They just knew that people were kind of shocked by the adherence itself, and so that's what they wanted to do, so that's what they did.
Right.
Yeah.
It's sort of a LARP.
I think it is true that some people
Lost you.
Are you still there? Oh, dang.
Let's Still show him on the call. Riley, you there? It still shows where we're streaming. So I don't know what's up.
Yeah, it could have been a cell connection or something. I mean, he could be all four of our callers tonight. He could be call back and be caller number 2.
444 is his number. You'll be lucky to win 444 Tfuel, which
17-18 bucks.
Yeah, right now.
Yeah,
right now.
And so,
well, that's all good.
Give it a couple years.
Anybody watching? I've got the in studio camera live right now, and not only did I want to show off the Theta light, that I got. I need to. I forget the guy I got it off from on Twitter, but it's a good prop for the studio as we're talking. But I also got a little toy that came with my kids' Chick-fil-A Happy Meal tonight, and when we were talking about Elon, and let me jump over to Elon. His shirt with his purported video of the Tesla going off into space. I think this is a good segue for, like I said earlier in the show, a lot of our activity since we've been in YouTube jail has been on Twitter, has been centered around this subject, the shape of the Earth. And I thought the Chick-fil-A Happy Meal was a good example of how our conception of it, whether it's the fact of the matter or not, is just kind of wagon hitched to, these companies wagon hitched to that conception for marketing purposes. And that, let's say it's wrong. Let's say it's wrong. Well, then what have all these companies done? What have they been a party to? A total mass misconception. And that's something Xavier has talked about at length in our previous discussions, as have I. But, you had a good back and forth with Adam Green, which I think started a lot of the Twitter back and forth.
Definitely.
Not just our show, but he was on Owen Benjamin, and Owen Benjamin has become sort of a flat Earth acolyte, so to speak. He's become he's hitched his wagon to that train, and I don't think he's apologized to Eric Dubé.
No,
he probably should, and maybe they could have a fruitful discussion. Devoid of sarcastic quips and frat boyisms that Owen would surely wage, because he did wage them.
Just so immature and pathetic. Not respectful, and just kind of goes to show, he was just way behind the 8 ball on so many intellectual
and he
levels.
Was mad about it. It hurt his ego that he wasn't on that curve. That's what I think.
Well, I mean, at least he's come around to the questioning of
courage.
What he's inherited.
Hey, Owen, if you're listening to this, I appreciate the fact that you had the courage to come out publicly and further tarnish your reputation in the genuine questioning of the official science that we get on the shape of the Earth, because it is very damning to make that part of your public persona. And I, again, you had already done a great job destroying your public persona, and I applaud you for that, because I think you even applaud yourself for that, because you've grown through it. You've set up another platform where you can be outside the system, and all kudos to you for that. But I think a little humility in the matter would go a long way with the community, although maybe you don't care because
you're your own operator.
Yeah, right. I see a lot of people, egging you on. So, be that as it may, I think for the OGs in this sector, which you surely are not,
No.
You are not an OG in this sector. You owe it to someone like Dubé, who you admitted was right.
Right.
In providing a question that you couldn't really answer, or you couldn't debunk what was being said.
Well, and also I didn't really get a very substantive reply from Adam around the fact that the biggest world religion is basically this mystical panentheism.
He just totally hand
just
waves
went-
that.
it just went way over his head.
It's almost like a side. It's like a side topic that's not like central to his
it's
domain.
not central. It's peripheral though, and it's actually arguably just as, if not more, substantive in terms of excavation of control and subversion and mass misconceptions.
Well, when you look at practical subversion, meaning the sequestration of the population from their inheritance, which is the world, I think it's even bigger than the psychological sequestration from their own divinity,
Right.
which is what
They're-
the religions are having upon the people, and
Definitely.
that's debatable, right? What do you value more, your inherent understanding of divinity and ascension, essentially, versus physical
imminence
and
Reality,
existence,
yeah.
and movement and travel and all of that. I mean, that's a debate we should be having.
I think it is the ultimate
debate.
complementary debate. I mean, they're very much tied together. And think about it like this. I mean, sure, there's maybe 1 to 2 billion Christians, maybe another billion Muslims, but how many more billion people think that we're on a spinning space orb suspended in a chasm?
It's virtually unanimous.
It's maybe 7 billion, right?
Right.
Maybe more.
Right.
So that's the biggest religion.
Right.
Like let's kind of learn what the etymology of religion means. It
And
means
the
being
amount of
bound
video,
up to an idea.
the amount of actual video we have of legitimate exploration into this realm, compared to like the amount of video we have on NBA players, is not comparable. And people will say, well, yeah, it's a lot easier to get video of NBA players than it is of exploring space, but I'm talking about legitimate videos.
Oh well, then you're talking about the entire underpinning of the technological argument for space's existence in the first place. I mean, on the one hand, you have this schizophrenia that says that, the vacuum of space is so inhospitable, right? It's such a hostile environment, and people would die instantaneously, basically, if they didn't have their special little suits on when they're doing the spacewalks. But if we look at an environment that's arguably less hostile here on Earth, the water, we build crafts like submarines,
Right.
and the entire machine can be repaired and reconstructed from the interior, because the outside environment is clearly hostile, right? People can't operate and repair stuff very easily on the outside of a submarine because with all this water. So then why are we led to believe that it's so much easier in a massive vacuous chasm? I mean, I mean, the official narrative is that the International Space Station was constructed in this hostile vacuous chasm environment.
Of like a 30-foot pool,
Yeah.
right? But wouldn't an infinite vacuum be more powerful than even 12,000 foot depth in the water?
You would, I mean,
I would think.
but then they have this again. It's the science of power suggestion and make believe, because the level of vacuity purportedly is kind of similar to water. It lets you just kind of float around at a certain height, purportedly, which is why they're able to do spacewalks and all this kind of stuff. But which is more likely, though, that you've got industrial sabotage going on with fake, portrayals of this environment for money laundering purposes, essentially, or that all this money is funneled to things that actually only require a minute fraction of the purported budget that is being directed towards
this
it.
raises another good subject, which is very apropos for tonight's show. It's very in the news and current, the congressional hearings on the UFO whistleblowers.
Yeah.
Okay. Because, number one, this subject has been the subject of derision for so many years, and now we have some sort of official recognition being had on mainstream media about extraterrestrial crafts and reverse engineering and alien bodies and stuff, and it seems almost too scripted.
Well, because it's misdirection fundamentally. It's their way of sequestering the natural curiosity about have we really explored all the surface area? Have we really? Certainly that's got to be a dormant question in every honest person's thinking, independent of all the programming and inculcation they've got. I mean, from the time you're a kid, how far does the ocean really go when you first see it?
Right.
That sense of wonder, that sense of adventure and exploration is completely neutered, anesthetized, and obliterated with this scarcity model that we've inherited. That our senses are so defective that we can't sense a contiguous rotundity in all directions at all times, despite our ability to survey and measure all kinds of things. We can kind of see too far in all directions, but it doesn't matter because that's just refraction. And it's like, well, we don't really feel a whole lot of contrasting movement and all these different kind of directions that they purport. And we were born here, so we're just used to it. And it's like, there's really a whole lot of gaslighting in going on when it comes to the ability for us to experience this cosmology that is basically handed to us on a silver platter. And questions that emerge are answered with hand wavium. Oh no, you just don't understand. You don't know the math. You don't have the technology. You don't have the special telescopes. You lack. You're insufficient. Everything that you think you know is just a bracket. It's just a localized delusion. I mean, that's essentially what the space paradigm is saying to humanity, is that you're only experiencing this infinitesimal, insignificant sliver of existence here on this, anomaly ball, when in fact all of reality is completely detached from you. You can't experience it, really. 99.999999999% of the cosmos is elsewhere besides your immediate experience.
What do you think?
I think it's a grand deception.
Well, what do you think the average person is thinking when they are seeing congressional hearings talking about UFOs? Stephen Greer is out on different news networks, News Nation, talking about his work, which goes back into the 90s. And we have, in the conspiracy circles, the known entity of the fake alien invasion narrative, which we've talked about many times. I think it's easy to look at this and say, they're just conditioning us for this. And so you have this kind of like Coke versus Pepsi idea. It's either legitimate.
Right.
It's a whistleblower coming forward, and finally we're going to get some truth. You have the whole disclosure segment of the conspiracy circle, and then you have this is a sign of real disclosure, soft disclosure. Finally, we're going to start getting some more information, and then you have the other conspiracy extreme of this is just conditioning for the fake alien invasion, and it could be all of them,
with a huge aspect omitted. And I think that the omission is that these so-called rarefied craft or these.
Oh, didn't you hear Hillary on Jimmy Kimmel? It's a UAP. I had a conversation with my
Right.
wife about this morning. You know, the chyrons on all the shows say UFOs, but didn't you hear Hillary say the official nomenclature is UAP? And in the testimony, they're talking about UAPs. But the chyrons on the shows talk about UFOs because that's the
Right.
popularized nomenclature for what people have associated to be alien craft, like flying through the air
From intergalactic travel.
You know, yeah.
That's the egregore.
But
there,
Hillary
yeah.
did this little number on, I think it was
Kimmel.
Jimmy Kimmel, talking about, well, don't you know, we
They're
in the
UAPs
government we
now.
call it UAPs, and it's like y'all just fucking change it to memory hole the last propaganda iteration.
Well, right, because
And move forward with like confusion and just muddying the waters. There is a huge subject underneath.
Oh, yeah.
No doubt about it.
big one.
But they're muddying the waters, I think, intentionally.
Oh, totally. I mean, and we got into this notion of like meteorites and asteroids and stuff,
Right.
And how do you explain that stuff? And this realization of like, well, let's really observe that phenomena. That meteorites and asteroids are UAPs. They're unidentified aerial phenomena.
Right.
You cannot forensically trace the origin, trajectory, and exact locale of that light event that's happening in the sky. And beyond that, if we were to accept this eccentric cosmology that we've inherited, those very same supposedly, exploding or fireball space rocks, basically careening at hundreds of thousands of miles an hour, they ought to be going up at the apex of our view just as frequently as any other direction, but they always are coming down
Right.
from the top of our view.
I think you've mentioned
in one
this
way or
before.
another.
It's a
There's
very-
no termination at the apex. So that in itself says that, look, we don't fully know all the details around the reality in which we're in, but the official story that we're being given about these things
It's not consistent.
is highly dubious, and it needs to be questioned just like any other BS official narrative yarn that's out there. Just like the 9/11 yarn, just like the JFK yarn, just like all these yarns, they're manufactured consensus, artificial, plausible deniability
I mean,
yarns.
I kind of come down on it like I come down on voting.
Absolutely.
Don't do it. Just don't engage. The only way to win the game is to not play. What that was, I forget what 80s movie that was.
Isn't that Wall Street? No. That's Greed is Good. There was another movie. You're right. It's adjacent to that.
It has to do with mutually assured destruction, and the only way to win the game is not to play.
The Matthew Broderick one.
Yeah.
War Games.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the one.
That's the one. Where and then that's a whole other huge mass misconception of
Nuclear weapons,
nukes, and
Which again, Owen Benjamin's like coming out hard
He's-
against nuclear weapons. I mean, again, late to the party.
way
not
late.
an OG.
And
but
not
hey,
the most like eloquent or like well researched voice on the
no,
topic.
I mean he's
Like,
tweeting on his farm. I get
Right.
it. It's not his
It's
primary
fine.
source of income. Cool.
Whatever.
Hey,
It's
I
fine.
appreciate
It's
the
fine.
debate.
It's
I
fine.
appreciate triggering.
Right.
I think to a large extent CNN is more and more. We're probably going to be more trolling and triggering. Both in our Twitter activities and
Well, we would love to have Owen on. I mean,
Absolutely.
we've had Adam on.
we'd love to have Pearl Davis on.
Sure, and kind of go over some of the various hot button stuff. She kind of sorority girl.
Sure.
Gives the sorority girl treatment
There's
a little bit.
plenty to talk
but
about
it's
there.
fine,
I mean, I
it's
wish
fine.
she would talk a little bit more about abortion. I don't really hear that much, but that would be a good one
Yeah,
for you, Pearl. If you're looking for some clicks, You looking to cause some controversy? I mean, this thing about women voting and suffrage. I mean, it's a hard sell for women. I see your point, but abortion would really turn over some stones for you, I think. And
or hey, you could really go full bore and look at the history and the biggest ideological proponents of eugenics in the past 150 years and see where that takes.
Yeah, be a little more academic.
Be a little more erudite. Like you kind of come off as a sorority girl with like a 10th grade vocabulary. So it's a little bit, you know. It seems like a lot of your stuff is sort of astroturfed. That's my issue, because she is everywhere now.
Let's hope not. Yeah, she is.
Yeah, she's like, you know, she's clearly dumping a lot of money into her channel.
Good for her.
That's fine. It's just when you come out with videos of like how feminism is propaganda, and you put a little sidebar next to it, and then put masterclass, and it's literally a 20-minute video. That's just ego stroking, as far as I'm concerned, because what you're presenting is not a master class. You're presenting a very superficial, regurgitated version of events, and that's fine. But don't call it a master class.
I think one of the hardest things she's going to come up against. I think one of the hardest things she's going to come up against with her ideological opponents is the fact that she's out there saying this and that about how things should be. And she's not necessarily living up to that.
Well, duh. I mean, that's
so base.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to come back from that. I mean, that she's talking the talk, but she doesn't really walk the walk. I mean, that's a very reasonable criticism. But I think also beyond that she's just kind of in over her head on the topics that she's presenting, because she doesn't really have anything other than kind of recent statistical data sets and just sort of talking point condensations and synopses of people who have much more fleshed out arguments and philosophical purview than she does, and I don't know, it just comes off as like very dilute and sort of sophomoric, but you know, that being said, she does bring up some good points about, you know, how feminism kind of is government propaganda, and it is. I mean, the whole equality of the sexes, that's definitely a scripted piece of propaganda. And a lot of people just swallow it hook, line, and sinker, and it's just like a reflexive adage that people recite. It's just a canned bromide that people think of as a virtue, but it's really just this emptied out hollow egregore that's designed to confuse people. And you know, and you can look at the incentives and the agendas behind that, the reason why they would want a society that's that confused, and we can see the fruits of it now today with all of the dysphoria confusion epidemic, and how that has its roots in feminism as well. So but she doesn't really go into that very much, and you know, she really plays it safe because she needs those big channel count metrics to, you know, do her thing. But I have seen some interviews with her where she just seems like in over her head, like she's kind of out of her element, and she has her, like, I don't like her defense of Tate. That's lame and it's gross, and it needs to be dropped. Like, I wonder if they
hooked up, you know, after their show. Her interview with Jesse Lee Peterson,
that was cringe.
I like a lot of what Jesse says, but he's all right. He's a very simpleton.
Yeah,
and she could have prepared better for that. I mean,
a lot better.
Talk about her own Christian background, like the way she did.
Very lukewarm and sort of milquetoast,
lacking real grit and context,
or and controversy. Controversy, like, aren't you supposed to be like a shock jockess or something?
Yeah, you know, it was very. I mean, it was like,
where's the controversy?
You know, it was that aunt that everybody has who goes to church every Sunday, and you know, you have to go to church in order to be a good Christian. That literally is what she boiled it down to, and it's like, I thought you were purporting yourself to be deep.
Or like red pilled or something.
Yeah, red pilled or something. And it was like
that's very normie, if you ask me.
100%. Let's take a bio break. We're at 2 hours. We've got an hour left, so I'm going to play some music. Hopefully it'll play, and we'll be back in a few.
Yeah.
I require the solace of the shadow and the dark of the night. Sunshine is my destroyer. There shall never be another dawn. Looking upon ill creatures, one would not think that they contained such power. One could rule a universe with it. You must find them for me and destroy them.
we're back. This is your hosts, Dave, and Xavier Diamant on episode 42 of the Zetetic News Cast. If you're listening in, this is a live call-in show. We welcome anybody to join us and ask questions, discuss any of the topics or other topics that they'd like to bring up. The number is 1-855-877-5112. And if we get 4 callers in the queue, we'll be awarding the 4th caller 444 Tfuel to celebrate our 4-year anniversary, being the next generation news network powered by Theta. And Xavier and I were just taking a quick bio break and discussing, things that we were covering on the show and other things. Trying to bring it up now, this Chick-fil-A toy. I'm having trouble with my webcam, but it was a sticker card. You could stick your here we go. You could stick your celestial object, your rover, your soccer ball. They've even got the globe Earth there with a flag in it saying "Eat more chicken." Still silly sticking, and I think it's a good,
very apropos
analogy to the cartoonish reality that we're being fed, spoon-fed by the mainstream media, the corporations, the government. And we were talking about some of the debate that has been had on Twitter since we've been in YouTube Livestream jail for the last 3 months concerning the shape of the Earth and the different cosmologies. We were talking earlier about Elon Musk, among other billionaires involved in, commercial space travel, space tourism, the UFO congressional hearings, or as Hillary calls it on Kimmel, the UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon, which is a very broad subject, not limited to little green men traveling from distant galaxies to observe the human population, but also the what would you call it, the epistemological, the philosophical, the cosmological idea about where we are, the realm that we live in. And we were discussing some of the things that have been brought up, gravity, the upward or downward vector of the Earth or objects vis-a-vis the Earth, I guess we should address some of that. Previously, I think in our last stream we had Adam Green on.
Yeah, that's right. That was the last episode.
And episodes before that, we had him on and tried to discuss the sort of religious trappings of the space cosmology and the shape of the Earth cosmology, and there wasn't a whole lot of common ground when it came to acknowledging the influence of the major religions on this same idea. And there was sort of a grand acceptance of a hand waving, if you will, of acceptance towards the NASA promoted mainstream cosmology and
the world historic manufactured consensus yarn about, we've known about these balls in the sky since the Greeks, and then the brilliant canon priest operative Copernicus. He finally gelled all of the ideas that were from antiquity. I mean, and if you actually look at Copernicus's work, he openly cites antiquity concepts coming from Philolaus and Aristarchus, and those guys got their ideas from Pythagoras, and we've excavated Pythagoras as being yet another one of these kind of mythical beings, these grand teachers, these superordinate initiates that just have amazing knowledge about everything. That's a mythological figure, and even when you trace the supposed biography of this guy Pythagoras, he was a mystery school initiate. The guy got a lot of his ideas that were transmitted from basically orb worshipping sects of initiate orders. And we've talked about the Samothracian Kabiri ritual, Eleusinian mysteries. A lot of these ancient mystery schools eventually exported the idea of the pantheon of the gods into the light phenomena that we look up at night and see. And so the gods as orbs in the sky, that is, in fact, it's true that it's an ancient idea, but to chalk it up to forensic, empirically provable scientific reality based on maths is a totally different claim. And so it's one thing to acknowledge the egregores of the past and the kind of notions that shaped this cosmology that we've inherited about light years distance, gorillions and quadrillions of miles of expanding something into something we're not sure of, and all of this kind of came from the ancient Mediterranean Greco mysticism of the basically 1st century BC, according to the timelines that we've inherited as well, which are dubious in and of themselves for a number of reasons. That all of that was kind of imported into this more recent 450 year ago project of the Counter-Reformation, led by Copernicus and Galileo. And it's interesting, we've also excavated historically the relationship between the Venetian oligarchs and some of their top line propagandists like Paolo Sarpi, and their relationship with the eventual canonization of the heliocentric model, because Sarpi was actually a patron and a financial benefactor to Galileo. And so it shows you that there's this Game of Thrones agenda behind all kinds of things there. So this notion of science from time immemorial being just this innocent, transparent pursuit of truth, independent of objectives and incentives and ulterior motives, is just entirely ahistorical and naive, essentially. And that every step of the way, so-called what is being dubbed science has had, historically speaking, objectives built into all of its pursuits that do not that are not reducible to the narrative that we're being told as the general public of where these ideas come from and why they're true, et cetera, et cetera. There's actually an esoteric element to the advent of all these supposedly scientific notions, evolution included, atomism, really all of it. It runs the entire gamut, and it's a residue of the separation between science and philosophy and spirituality. So it's this separatistic development that's been going on for a long time within the Western mind, and here we are, however many dozens of fractals and generations later, dealing with the same schizoid formations within our cosmology, and not being able to reconcile it because the root structure of where they all came from has been basically torn asunder. People don't really understand and can't fully excavate the extent to which so many of the ideas that underpin modern science are in fact of a metaphysical, religious, spiritual nature. And so that's kind of a hard pill for a lot of people who think that there are just hard and fast certainties that can never be questioned, and that we've always figured certain things out. And when it comes to certain things, quote unquote, we just have to agree on something that's been dubbed settled, dubbed a final form of knowledge. And here at ZNN, really the principle of zetesis is to not just hastily conclude at any given point along the way. There can be an operating hypothesis that is constantly fine-tuned and updated as new information presents itself. So I think that's actually a better epistemological purview than this kind of mystical authoritarianism that very much operates front and center in pretty much every single field you want to dub science today. There is a mystical authoritarian order, a kind of counterfeit initiation nexus, a guild system, a gatekeeping operation that is embedded in every single field of so-called scientific knowledge. And learning the influences that brought all that about, it is it's no easy pill to swallow, because it shows that even the things that we hold dear as settled and firm and finalized forms of knowledge are in fact counterfeit, defective, inchoate, and insufficient in actually describing reality as it's experienced. And so there is a huge epistemological quandary and a crisis essentially within the sciences going forward, and that is because there's been so much of the water that's been muddied between what constitutes practical, pragmatic inventions that have replicability, demonstrability, measurability, etc., to things that are extremely abstract and theoretical, that through technology are laying claim to practical or pragmatic science and sort of muddying the waters between those two different kinds of thinking. And really boil it down, I mean, it's essentially forensic empiricism or direct realism versus a kind of metaphysical theoreticism. But the metaphysical theoreticists who are obsessed over models and maths and projections have imported all of those speculations and those philosophical ideas, really at the end of the day, into things that have practical, pragmatic manifestations. So they kind of lay credit or they claim credit for things that are actually not owed to their ideas. And that's where a lot of confusion resides in the current scientific debates, is that people don't really know how to parse the difference between pragmatic or practical forensic empiricism, direct realism, versus something like this kind of metaphysical speculation or abstractionism that is really ultimately pseudoscience. It's kind of desire for a certain kind of knowledge that is understandable, right? Certainly, we want to know things that are beyond, just the limited dimensions of our physical existence, and there's nothing wrong with that desire to pursue those questions, but saying that it operates on the same level of demonstrability, repetition, and measurability of more forensic, directly experiential, empirical observations, that's a different story. I mean, and so I think that a lot of the confusion resides in trying to parse like kind of real science from counterfeit science, and that ideas from pseudoscience or counterfeit science have so enmeshed themselves into people's rightful convictions that we can know certain things through an empirical process, and that is true. But learning how to separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, is a very detailed process within the sciences, and it's not something that people really want to dedicate a lot of their time to, because you have to excavate a lot of things, and a lot of paradigm shifts, and a lot of controversies, a lot of unsettled debates, a lot of lingering issues, unanswered questions, etc., and that's very decentering. That gets people out of their comfort zone in a way that is certainly not incentivized or encouraged in mainline society or academia, for that matter. So that's kind of the issue that confronts this topic of like questioning establishment cosmology. Is you've got this big, behemoth, this big kind of tidal wave of false certainty syndrome that you're up against.
Yeah, I think there's a good tornado of debate and content coming around the sort of YouTube flat Earth triangle of creators and subject matter. Nathan Oakley, MC Toon, Jeranism, and I think we have Nathan and Jeranism installed on the Zetetic.news website. We've also had Nathan on our show previously, and I think it's great that we have this debate going on. Some people think it's like a waste of time, and I just feel sorry for them.
That's just hand-wavium, though. I mean, that's ignorance. That's an appeal to ignorance, essentially.
Yeah, and it's lazy.
It's lazy.
It's lazy. And it's a very passionate debate, but I think right now, like you said, there's gonna be a lot of unanswered questions on both sides, but I think it's a measure of which questions are the most relevant to like what we experience and what we should really be focusing on,
and why so many of these questions are just like dismissed out of hand as taboos or anti-intellectualisms, when in fact it's a very nuanced and complicated subject. Goes back a long ways.
I applaud Nathan Oakley's adherence to his debate principles and the the logical side of the discussion, but where I differ with him is he sort of hand waves discussing motives.
Yeah, which I think is a very important part of the equation, because you're always going to come up against this thing of like, oh, well, who benefits from lying about the shape? I mean, that's like the first question that almost every single person comes up with. And if you
don't have an answer for it, I mean, you should have some point of view about it. Instead of, well, it doesn't matter. Yes, it does matter.
Well, it definitely matters. Now, as to whether you can, divine the ultimate answer, that's sort of a separate issue.
Sure. And I guess, that's his focus. That's fine. I applaud what he's doing and how he's doing it. likewise, he seems to have this big beef with Jaren because he didn't call out the flat baseline triangle with MC Tune, and he missed this big opportunity
to dunk on the whole premise.
And I don't know. It's kind of like the whole Trump DeSantis sort of paradigm of divide and conquer, in my opinion. All this division.
Yeah.
We should. I wish we could come together with Adam and come to some unity. Well,
I think that unfortunately, so much of his audience are atheist types that have a huge religious allegiance to not questioning the dogma and authority associated with these scientific models. It just shows you how
much dogma we're up against, and we recommend
a lot of dogma.
Adam, have you watched the movie yet?
I don't know if he has, even though it's definitely right up the alley. And I mean, at the end of the day, certitude is basically a pursuit of reifying one's comfort zone at the end of the day. And some certainty we can't help but crave, and that's a psychological kind of part of the human condition. But I think if you're going to be dispassionate and you're going to be honest and you're going to be objective and consistent with your application of skepticism, logic, and critical investigation and historical excavations and all this, you can't come across the space issue and that whole cosmology and just accept it at face value. You have to look at the evolution of the ideas, and by evolution I really just mean development. And at the end of the day, the whole so-called science around evolution is a power of suggestion, ideology that is projected onto our very empirical observations of life forms developing and changing over time, and that's observable. Micro evolution, right, is certainly observable, but when you start getting into the weeds of dozens of millions of years, billions of years, explosions turning into gases that somehow form into rocks that somehow produce. I mean,
it sounds very alchemical.
This is alchemy. This is mystical insights into a Genesis episode, essentially. This is a Genesis thesis, that abiogenesis, right? That there's some sort of like mechanical force that just produces life innately, like and somehow over billions of years with random chance circumstance being applied throughout, that ultimately there's some sort of randomized sentience or consciousness that develops from that. And again, that's a philosophical assumption. It's not demonstrable. It's not really testable. It's a metaphysical premise, and that's okay. People can believe that all they want, but they can't really justifiably call it certainty or knowledge. It's a conviction. It's a belief. It's something that they just adhere to because psychologically or personally they happen to concur with the premises. But again, that's really at the level of gesticulation and expostulation, excogitation. It's not really something that can be forensically demonstrated, and that's true in the ideas pertaining to atomism and fission and all of this kind of other stuff. Oppenheimer, the movie that just came out, right? Celebrates this so-called, reluctant mad genius that happened upon the right, ideas to create this mega.
It brings up a tweet we retweeted on X. We re-X'd on X. The Times of Israel blog. Yes, white actors playing Jewish roles is whitewashing. Talking about this is the Oppenheimer gig, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
How does that work? That's like the golden ticket you talk about before with respect to, you can be Jewish, but you're not white.
Right, but you can pass and have all of the advantages of it,
but not all the negatives.
But never the negatives, really.
Actually, you have an advantage.
You have an advantage ultimately. So, it's very interesting because ultimately the term white now has just become a blanket pejorative to signify, evil, oppressive, colonial urges. Right? I mean, isn't that, however it's used, whenever it's used, that's kind of what it's supposed to signify.
I saw on the local news recently, I don't know what month it is, but they were talking about Disability Pride Month. And I'm just like, we only have 12 months to do something with. And there's an infinite number of group identities that we can be proud about. How far are we going to take this, guys? Really, Disability Pride Month? I'm not saying you should hate yourself because you're disabled, but I mean, what are we doing here? And the thing that stuck out to me is you can have Disability Pride Month, you can have Gay Pride Month, you can have LGBTQ plus Pride Month, but you can't have White Pride Month.
You can't even have
because it is, like you said, it's a pejorative.
It's a blanket pejorative.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Supreme Court ruled against affirmative action, and part of me is like, rock on, like,
right? But
cool,
But at the end of the day, is it really going to affect the
you have
propagandized ideological?
No, I mean the damage has already been done.
Exactly.
Like it is concerning. It should be concerning to everybody. If you're applying for a job or a school or whatever, you're asked by your government what your racial identity, your gender identity, blah blah blah. They're going further than that, your sexual orientation in some cases, depending on who you're talking to. And I'm asking myself, how is this being more diverse? If that's the goal and we're trying to eliminate discrimination, why are you giving all these signals
that it's okay to discriminate
for somebody to discriminate?
Right, exactly,
And so I always opt out of those questions, as should anyone. Like, that is a manifestation of the affirmative action civil rights movement. And like you said, they can kind of peel back on the regulatory enforcement of it, but the psychological damage has already been done. Companies will ask anyways, and these signals will be garnered, and who's being discriminated against is not who you think.
Right. Or if they are, well, it's about time. It's about time that the evil colonizers got their just desserts, right? I mean, there's always this kind of lingering justification of whatever double standard is being.
There's also a major grift with respect to the disability classification, because now if you allow transgenders, why would you not allow transabled? And
or trans species.
Companies have to make reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities who are qualified for the job, this sort of thing. And it becomes a big legal issue for the companies themselves, which actually reduces the amount of hiring they're willing to bear. Also, it drives up the cost of employment in general, which means they're going to reduce that as much as they can.
Right.
To optimize their existing resources and their profit margins. So this whole idea of affirmative action and diversity, equity, and inclusion, although ostensibly is to garner some sort of financial benefit and you might say reparation to people who've been disenfranchised, it's actually doing the very thing they're trying to overcome, which is disenfranchisement. It's less hiring. It's a worse economy. It's
a form of austerity.
A smaller cut of the pie. It's a smaller pie.
Right.
And it might make some people feel good, specifically those who are perhaps in the DEI economy, or promoting these programs, which I don't know why the companies are like racing to. I mean, I guess not all are. Some are bucking that. But yeah, it just reduces the pie for everybody, and at the same time, it is again purportedly to overcome institutional racism, but in the process, we've talked about it is instituted racism,
right?
Which is mind-blowing.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of
how they do that.
It's kind of by design, and it goes back to this whole program
by design
of like schizophrenic confusion. You know, using contradictory policies and messages simultaneously to just sort of shock and awe and paralyze and like anesthetize the target population into just essentially being coerced into going along with whatever is occurring, because no action is still an action.
Right.
And by hypnotizing people basically with these schizophrenic egregores, ultimately you're creating a pliable psychology so that you can suggest all kinds of
Gumby society.
A Gumby society, exactly, where you can mold, you know, trends and people in all sorts of ways, including ways that, you know,
it's the homunculus.
Yes,
it's the homunculus paradigm.
Definitely.
People are homunculized,
or the golem paradigm.
Right.
Similar idea there, and you know, it's much more pervasive than people are giving it credit. You know, like people will sort of acknowledge that, yeah, there's these double standards, but there's also these historical wrongs, and you know, we just gotta kind of meet in the middle somehow. And it's this, you know, it's basically the fallacy of the perfect middle, right? Where if you have two insane extremes, essentially, the middle is also going to be an insane extreme.
Mm-hmm.
So just by finding a middle between, you know, two,
that's the Overton window,
right? Yeah. And it's exactly it's related to the concept of rigged frames of reference, where if you load a frame of reference with a bunch of presumptions and presuppositions that people are just supposed to tacitly accept and never examine.
It's the old marketing gimmick, you know, a value of $399, yours today for $599, and you're like, damn, that's a good deal. Or let me get that good deal, and then you buy that piece of shit and you get it and it breaks the next day, and you're like, was that really worth $6?
Or it's like, you know, $7,000 signing bonus on this brand new SUV or something, right?
Right.
And, you know, if you. And then you read the fine print, and it's like, yeah, the SUV is like $100,000, and the loan's 10%. And well, we're gonna go ahead and
you have to read
you
our service contract, and we're gonna wash your seats for you and get the stains out. Yeah,
and that's now being used. That same gimmick is being used on such a huge scale that it's hard for people to detect because it's such a huge
It's part
scale.
of the culture.
Right.
They expect
Right.
it now.
Right.
You know, they expect it.
Right. They've been acclimated to this kind of like notion of fealty to whatever comes about. Right. It's got to be something worthwhile, right, or else it wouldn't emerge.
Right.
It's this kind of naive realism, basically, that's been, the goose that's being cooked all these years. The whole Hansel and Gretel dilemma. Like, how long are we going to be fattened up before we get put in the oven, right? Proverbially speaking, and when are we going to turn the tables and, put the
run out of the house, and
right, and put the witch in the oven? It's like, at what point is that gonna happen, or is the fairy tale gonna end in a much darker way
right
than the one that we're used to?
Right, that's a good question, and that brings us back to the subject we sort of kicked off with, is the financial system.
Yeah,
because I think that's the big question right now, vis-a-vis the Hansel and Gretel story. When is this shoe gonna drop? Because I've talked about this before. I kind of woke up to the tenuous nature of the financial system back in 2008, and many people before me had been talking about it leading up to that big sort of secondary 9/11, the financial 9/11. And at that time, my thinking was, man, the ATMs just almost shut off, and they've been able to sort of patch this together, but they're not going to be able to keep it together for very much longer. And I was very urgently thinking that they would not be able to kick the can down the road, but here we are,
2023, already halfway done,
and it's just this slow burn.
Yep.
And I think it is notable, the innovation of Bitcoin around that time frame.
Yep.
As a sort of, you've called it a pressure valve before.
Yeah.
A managed decline and transition to this new thing.
Yeah.
And having lived through, I really started paying close attention to Bitcoin in 2016. Didn't really dabble until 2018. But being aware of the crypto situation vis-a-vis this managed decline of the TradFi system, have definitely come around to the idea that this is a sort of pressure valve mechanism for the birthing of a not happy ending to this fairy tale, Hansel and Gretel.
Right.
So when are we going to be put into the oven? Because every time the Fed has a new update, I'm kind of on pins and needles. They continue to posture that they're going to raise rates, which is a, cracking of Humpty Dumpty, to use another analogy, an intentional cracking of Humpty Dumpty. They know what kind of conditions they've already created with this co-cerveza virus situation, and they are poised. I mean, they're poised, and I don't really, the people waving the victory flags for XRP Army, I think that is not good.
It's sort of again, it's this weird Pyrrhic victory, right? So certain people, maybe you'll get some percentage gain, right, on this particular token, but if it becomes the basis by which everyone is now on UBI expiry tokens just to survive, because there's only 4 grocers left in the world, and there's only 3 telecoms, and everything is basically hyper corporatized,
homogenized.
It's homogenized, but it's also tokenized. The homogeneity is tokenized in such a way that there's lots of different options of these this tokenized economy, I think that they could get to a point where they literally do just give people money all of the time, but it's on an expiration, and because it's an expiry based earmarked fund for people, it doesn't affect inflation because the dollars essentially disappear in the slush of transactions that occur. And so, say you set up a UBI of like $2,000 a month per person, but you have to spend it within 28 days, and nothing rolls over essentially. So no savings can actually happen, and with that mechanism, you could technically maintain standard of living and purchasing power on a completely artificial tokenized basis, which is actually like hyper fiat, because the fiat doesn't actually because the token doesn't actually remain. It just gets obliterated after a certain period. So if someone doesn't spend the money within a certain period of time, it's gone. So I think that's going to be the mechanism by which they roll out UBI, are these temporary earmarked limited use tokenomics. And that can easily be done through a platform like Ripple. That can easily be done through all these different platforms that are coming out. So because if you look at Ripple's CBDC website, it shows that you can have destructible tokens, essentially tokens that have an expiration date, essentially,
Right.
that just disappear and are obliterated from the supply. So the central banks actually, on the one hand, they hate this new development because it means that they can't really kibitz the economy through their proclamations in the same way that they've been used to in previous generations. However, they're also super infatuated with it because
they can use it to their own.
They can use it to their own advantage.
They can
Right.
appropriate the technology, and then through their normal means of use of force, they can try and
they can turn people on and off.
get everybody on their system so that they can do what they are chartered to do, which is governing your mind and your body, and that is interesting to consider because it's essentially like making the entire world a company store.
Yes,
and
precisely.
The very authorities who are in control of bringing that about are the ones who were put there ostensibly to prevent the horrors of the company store. And if you think about it,
exactly,
there's not anything inherently unethical about a company store. If you run a company and you make many different products and you have people working for you, you might be able to, earn further profits by creating a store and then issuing credits to your employees that they can optionally work for instead of the commonly accepted currency.
Exactly.
There's nothing ethically wrong with that.
No, there's not.
Certain implementations might be oppressive and things of that nature, but
sure,
I would rather have, we talk about diversity, okay, wouldn't you rather have these different options and islands and oases that people recognize as being good, an open market of different company stores that you might want to work for, or you never know, these company stores might open themselves up to external vending, the very idea of it is not necessarily a bad one, but I think that's been heavily propagandized in order to justify this centralized managed financial system that we have now, and that was part of the foundation of their founding.
Oh yeah, I mean the UN, UNESCO, really the post war era was all about this idea of like, all right, we fought the last international major military conflict. Like, we have to basically circle our wagons as world powers around constantly threatening the menace of another world war with sophisticated, technological weapons. But really, we're all on the same page that it's essentially propaganda, and that we have to keep the masses essentially in a constant state of fear or potential upheaval. And as long as that tenuous psychology amongst the masses is there, we can give them false reassurances that everything's going to be okay, and so they can all play good guy, good cop, bad cop. That's what kind of the role of government has become, is this constant balancing act of this false game of good cop, bad cop, and really the entire thing is sort of evil. But they will give certain carrots. It's the whole carrot and stick approach, essentially, where the carrot will be, oh, well, if you comply with all of our edicts and you are a good person and you don't, say things we disagree with, then you'll have the ability to get even more credits, and then you can trade these credits in at your local Amazon station.
Yeah, that reminds me of an article I posted on the official Zetetic.news in Telegram. Pentagon AI more ethical than adversaries because of Judeo-Christian society, USAF general says. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure our adversaries are just laughing at this kind of propaganda.
That's hilarious.
What a joke.
It's a total joke.
And look at who we have as our military commanders. You got a dyke on the right and this like Homer Simpson looking guy on the left. Like they've totally cut the balls off. It's all AI and drones now anyways.
Right.
With the military. They don't want to train, human killers who could possibly ever question and resist what they're building. So
the irony is, this potentially catastrophic technology was released in a Judeo-Christian society, right?
Developed
and bred from the get-go, and the just the hypocrisy of saying that, like, our society is so ethical because of this, mythocosmology allegiance that we have. Meanwhile, it's also making the thing that's potentially incredibly catastrophic more ethical at the same time. It's more this schizophrenia that is so abundant today, and
all kinds of weird justifications for the war machine.
Wild. Very important discussion being held by the Department of Defense, very highest levels, says Service Programs Chiefs. The path to an ethical AI. It's almost like an oxymoron, right? Because certainly something that is as comfort and convenience based as AI comes from a society that is in decline due to its decadence.
Well, that's the question is, okay, so AI has to mimic society. Is society ethical? You know what I mean? Like, as a whole, like, if we're going to average it all out and like what we actually do here.
I mean, I do think that the vast preponderance of activity is sort of neutral to benign. I wouldn't necessarily say good, but it's neutral to benign. And part of the SCU's, elite army is that they use thanatoid hyperbole, so they want to turn neutral to benign activity into something that's inherently problematic and needs redemption and needs salvation. It needs to be, cleansed of its sin somehow. So in a way, I do think that society has an inherently ethical core to it. That the mere ability for people to cooperate in a neutral to benign fashion amongst large numbers in a kind of essentially a instinctual manner, I think, is inborn within human consciousness and potential. So you don't need an outside didactic, authoritative.
Most people want peace and prosperity.
Right.
It's and of course the people who deviate from that are the ones who get the most attention. But that's why they call it artificial intelligence. It's not actual intelligence. So you might argue, on the whole, like you said, maybe we are ethical as a society. But I think it's another branding thing. Like we talked about UAPs versus UFOs and this whole mass confusion. AI is very much like climate change. The way I look at it, like they're gonna keep changing sort of how we view it and like what it is and how it manifests. Whereas climate change used to be global warming. And there was global cooling as well, and
and artificial intelligence. Let's be honest. That's a euphemism. What it really is the digitalization of the Stasi state. Essentially, it's like a data collection enterprise on steroids. Like it makes Google kind of look like a sandbox. It looks like a kind of child's play a little bit compared to what AI is already being able to do. So the term itself and the utterance and the common parlance and the sort of household brand and recognition of it is a form of power in and of itself. That it acclimates people through power of suggestion that this is just like a natural eventuation of scientific processes. That it's something that we can't necessarily control or prevent. It's just like a natural progression of
they're
human
saying
evolution.
That, and
that's
it's also true.
Yeah, there's truth to it.
Now that it's been summoned, it can't be uninvented.
Too
many people have their hands on it.
Can't put the genie back in the bottle.
Right.
And in this instance, be careful what you wish for, even if it's for more wishes. So the idea that one of the wishes that people would be curious to impose upon the genie is, one of my wishes, I want 3 more wishes.
Right.
And then once you get to the last wish, I want 3 more wishes. And so that the parameters around AI now is that it is this kind of dangerous genie in a lot of ways. That this techno oracle that we've developed, and I don't think we know how to let it out of the bottle, because I think that, again, going back to the precautionary principle, like we didn't back test all of the potential ramifications. It didn't research all of the fallout and the negative attributes it could have on the economy, industry, etc., etc. So I
think they actually did, and what we will perceive as negatives, they perceive as positives.
Well, sure, the chaos magic, exactly.
But also the perceived efficiencies that they will gain. But I actually think it could be a race to the bottom, because you will have this like interim period where companies realize big savings because they can reduce headcount by automating these various processes. But I think like the more and more you do that, the more discontent you are going to be sowing. For example, who has a good experience anymore calling into a company? Nobody, because it's so hard to get a human being on the other line. Now, their argument will be, well, we're progressing now to the point where it's going to feel so human. But I think that remains to be seen. It's kind of like the uncanny valley of 3D animation, where despite all the progression in that, they still can't quite mimic 100% convincingly a human being acting on video. Now, I might be proven wrong here shortly, but that is the moral hazard and the risk that we're trying to ring the alarm bells on as well. Like I want to have hope in humanity to like sort of see through this, but at the same time I see what's happening with Hologram Joe and the potentials of, I mean, it is commonly accepted that he is at the base level like an actor or a body double.
There are composite individualities on the world stage, absolutely. Big celebrity names, they've got trigger people, they've got stand-ins, they've got coached NDA personnel that are, laying in the wings. The whole seconding network. And people need to see the 1968 Rock Hudson movie Seconds, because it details this very real kind of revelation of the method of how major personalities and influential figures, how they can be kind of whisked away and killed off, but maybe they're
living
replaced,
on an island with Napoleon and Hitler.
Or there's plenty of resources to be used for these ends, because, I mean, let's be honest, the Government Accountability Office has no way of tracking all the transactions that happen. There's no way of inventorying, cataloging all the money laundering that happens.
That's the ace card humanity has up its sleeve. It is not wholly untrue that government is occupied by incompetent people, but I think it's a hand wave to say
there is an evil within the incompetence,
right? Like that there's not an intelligent design behind it either, because there definitely is, but there are a lot of opportunities to avoid legally and lawfully, of course, not financial advice, the system at large. And I have been told by a data company founder that AI is essentially vector math. So they've devised a way to vectorize text, and then you can measure proximity between all sorts of different dimensions of a word and a sentence and a paragraph to other sentences, words, and paragraphs, and draw relations. And it's basically advanced statistics that is driving the AI applications, which are
or like hashing algorithms.
Yes, well. Those are a big part of the process, and it just made me think of the Matrix itself.
Absolutely.
Because what happens when Neo can see everything, it's all ones and zeros. So one has to consider that piece of revelation of the method, Hollywood movie magic, when they're considering what is taking shape, in our world today.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild. We could go on for another 3-4 hours.
We could, but we can't. We're gonna have to wrap up the stream. Thank you guys for listening in. We still got some concurrent viewers.
That's good.
Some good comments, and we'll have to reach out to Riley to give him that 444 Tfuel for his participation. This has been a blast with your host Dave David, myself, and Xavier Diamant on episode 42 of the Zetetic News Cast. If you like this content, please
share it around,
share, subscribe, comment down below, and don't forget to visit Zetetic.news, bookmark us, and hit us up. Next time, we're a live call-in show, and we always welcome different ideas and perspectives because we're real diverse.
Yeah, we're an open forum, equitable platform for including.
Peace out.